All right, great. Oh, thank you all for your thumbs up. Okay, so welcome everybody. It's so nice to see all your faces. What I'm going to do is I want to start with a little bit of grounding. And I want us to leave all of the worries that we have brought to us into this room. I want to leave it on the metaphorical other side of the Zoom room. So I'm going to lead a little bit of a grounding meditation, and I'm going to, as I start to pull up my screen and share my screen, I'm going to ask that you maybe turn off your phone. You put, if you have any screens up, if you can close the screens, if you have any notifications that are coming in and out, maybe you can stop those. And I want you to really get settled and be fully present here. And I want to extend an invitation to all of you to chant a nigun with me. This nigun are the words that Abraham and Moses said to God when each was approached with an important task. And they both replied and answered the call by replying, Hineni, here I am. And before we start, I just want everybody to get comfortable in their chair. Maybe you can feel your feet grounded and connected and rooted on the floor. And you can feel your sits bones in your chair. And I invite you to put your hands, hand over hand. You can put it on your neck, on your chest, on your heart, on your stomach, wherever it feels most comfortable for you. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that even though we have you on mute, because there's a delay and it would create this echo chamber, but I want you to imagine that as we sing this all together, that you can hear this beautiful sound of our congregation singing together. It's very simple. It's one word. And I think after the first time I sing it, you'll all get it. So here we go. Last time. Now, before you open your eyes, just want you to have a little bit of unified awareness. I want you to notice your breath. I want you to notice what's going on in your awareness in your mind. And I also want you to notice what's happening in your body. So As you open your eyes and return, I just wanted to offer a few thoughts before I get started on the more formal part of our presentation, if you will. Uh, Through this time, I've been in a lot of communication with colleagues of mine, and we've been talking about how living through these times, which is quite honestly unprecedented, it's been this crash course in present moment awareness and how that is so critical and important right now. Um, and this experience that continues to unfold, it just shines a spotlight on the power of living in the now. And with all the uncertainty that we're all feeling right now that's brought on by this virus, it is so easy for our minds to go to really dark and scary places. But for many of us, some of those worries, for the most part, are things that we're worrying about, things that might or might not happen in the future. But right now, in the present moment, we're currently safe. And that's what I really want to talk about today. I want to talk about strategies that can help bring us back to the present moment, ways that we can create islands of sanity amidst the current chaos that's going on throughout our whole world right now. These are proactive actions that we can take to kind of press the reset button in our lives to put a stop to those incessant worry loops and give our chance for our bodies to rest and restore and to recover. So for those of you who don't know me or who joined in a little bit later, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Alison Deutsch. I am a fellow congregant, and our family joined Beth David a little over 2 years ago. Some of you might know me. I had the great privilege and honor of co-leading a congregational Shabbat with Cantor Goodlev, where we talked about the intersection of positive psychology and positive Judaism. In terms of my professional background, I assure you this is the most confusing page with the most words on it that will be in this whole presentation. But the truth is I have certifications, multiple certifications, and things like positive psychology and coaching and happiness studies, which for most people doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. So what I'd like to tell people is that you can think of me like a personal trainer for your brain. And what I do is I help empower you to do stress better. And here's the truth though. While I train and speak and facilitate and coach on stress management, I am, full disclosure, I am by no means immune to it. In fact, what drew me to this particular field to specialize in stress management is my own personal propensity to be a very highly anxious person. And you might have heard the saying that oftentimes we teach what we need to learn. So I have to be honest, when I sat down to reflect on what I possibly could share with you all today, any tip or tool that I could give, it just felt insufficient, right? Because there's no magic bullet here that's going to help us all feel better or make what we're experiencing recede or go away. This is not a case where the stress that we're feeling is something like a misperception of reality or a story that we're making up in our head based on past experiences. I mean, what we're living through is this health scare, this global pandemic, and it brings up real survival fear because the truth is, for some, this virus is very deadly. So this period that we're going through, it's a period of both rapid and radical transformation. And some of us might be already feeling this, but if you're not yet, this is coming, assure me. I can assure you, is this collective grieving, right, of all that we've lost. And we're also experiencing this collective sense of anxiety because we're not sure, the future feels so uncertain. And this is like this discomfort that we're feeling, again, perfectly normal. It's like we're transversing this space between the no longer and the not yet, right? It's kind of this desert, if you will, this no man's land. And it kind of reminded me, since we're in the season of Passover, right? It kind of reminds me of how the Jews might have felt when they escaped slavery in Egypt, but they had no idea what would come next. And I mean, we talk about the story of Passover, but it ends with the parting of the Red Sea. But we know how the story continues, right? There's 40 years in the desert before they get to the promised land. And so I think we can learn a lot from our ancestors who relied on patience, trust, and faith through this process. So I think we're all called upon at this time to invoke patience, trust, and faith. And in addition to that, my hope is what I could offer a little bit today is a bit of the science, a little bit of the neurobiology of stress. And what I find is when I do this, my hope is that, well, a couple things. One is I want to normalize our collective experience, like we're all stressed out here. I also want to depersonalize any reactions that you're feeling. Sometimes I hear people saying, don't overreact. Some people say, oh, you're underreacting. Anything, permission to be human. This is the human experience. So please do not judge yourself or others. It's really important at times like this to treat ourselves with kindness and with self-compassion. And really what I hope I can offer just today is some hope, right? That we're not helpless. We can empower ourselves with tools. There are things we can do to help us manage our worries. So we're going to explore 3 questions today. What is the difference between stress and worry? How our bodies are designed to recover from stressors naturally? And what are the things we can do to override our biological propensity for worry and return to rest and restore? And what I find is when I teach this, I have a signature program called Do Stress Better, and it's usually taught over 8 weeks. So this is going to be like a little taste of it. But what I find is when my clients really understand the neurobiology of stress, they start to see how they can make simple minor changes to things that they're doing every day. And even those minor changes can really bring on a significant change in their levels of stress. And also, when people understand how and why an intervention works, they typically do it more mindfully. They don't just go through the motions. A lot of the stuff I'm going to teach you is probably not stuff you hadn't heard before, but I find when clients understand, oh, that's what it's doing, or that's the way it's supposed to work, then they have a tendency to remember to do it and do it with meaning and intention. So before we get to answering these questions, I have a question for you. And this is where I'm going to ask people to write in the chat box while I figure out how to open my chat, is I want you to tell me how you know when you're stressed. What are you feeling in your body and what are you noticing in your mind? And let's see. Oh, here we go. All right. Okay. My neck hurts. There's a little bit of delay in here. So as you just keep typing in, I can't sleep. I feel knots in my stomach. Inability to concentrate or focus. Short-tempered. Sleeping. Exhausted all the time. Pains, headaches. High blood pressure. That's from my daughter, the neuroscientist. Poor sleep. Somebody feels it running down their arms. Interesting. Okay. Mind chatter, increased tension in shoulders and neck muscles. Yeah. These are all, and as you can see, there's a lot of commonality, right? Some people stress eat, some people stop eating a lot. And so everyone's feeling it. And here's what I want to share with you. If you want, as it turns out, these symptoms that you're sharing and that we're all experiencing, they're actually the signs of a healthy nervous system, right? This is our body's way of preparing us to respond to a threat, right? So you've all heard of the fight or flight reaction, right? It's something that's automatically triggered in our brain. We release adrenaline, we release cortisol, and the intention of it is to prepare us to be stronger and more focused and extra motivated. So the increase in the blood pressure or the heart rate that's pounding, or the shallowness of the breath, all of those things are designed to put more blood to our muscles or more oxygen so that we can fight an adversary or we can flee or run from it. And what also happens is that the biological functions that we don't need for immediate emergency, things like our digestion, they kind of shut down and they slow down. And that's why sometimes people have stomach aches or irritable bowel syndrome or any kind of stomach discomfort, heartburn, because our digestive system is impacted. One thing that's really important is to know is that if we're in chronic stress, that our immune system is slows down. It doesn't work as it intended to, because again, our immune system is not really needed for an immediate threat. And there's also psychological implications. A lot of you were talking about that you can't focus or you can't sleep. What happens here also is that our brain, the blood goes rushing to our limbic system, if you will, or fight or flight. And the stuff that we need for critical thinking or problem solving, that kind of goes offline and there's not as much blood flow from there. And so that it also inhibits our ability to think critically and make creative choices and make good decisions. So again, all that we're feeling, perfectly normal and signs of a healthy nervous system. Now, the way our nervous system is designed is once the immediate threat has passed, once the stress has been resolved, our body just normally and naturally and automatically returns to this default state, which is really rest and restore. And what is the toggle switch for that is something called the vagus nerve, which starts in our base of our stem of our brain, and kind of goes through our ear and through our neck and through our larynx, through our diaphragm, all the way through all of these systems. And it comes back online and says, okay, everyone, it's time to relax and recover. And this on-off switch is typically what happens in all humans. In all animals, right? I'm sure you've seen the National Geographic shows where animals, they get spooked, they run, and then once they acclimate or they realize the danger is gone, they'll go back to whatever they were doing. Maybe they were feeding or they were grazing. And that's how we're designed to work. But there's a little bit of a glitch here, because we humans, we have this prefrontal cortex, right? This higher order brain. And what that brain does is it gives us the capacity to replay events from our past or look into the future so we can plan. Now, this was really important and helpful, especially back in the day when our ancestors needed to figure out saber-toothed tiger, not a good thing. So next time if I see it, I'm gonna be quiet, or I'm gonna run away, or I'm always gonna be scanning the horizon for things that are dangerous. So it's evolutionary hardwired for us to scan for danger, and it kept us safe. The other thing is about worrying about the future, right? So if our ancestors who lived through drought, for example, they remembered it so that they planned and stored food in the event that there was another drought. So again, these emotions, perfectly normal, critical survival, but not so great when our brain gets stuck there and they get stuck in this worry loop. So here's the thing about what's going on today. This pandemic that we're living through has many elements that are triggering us. It's like the perfect storm to both trigger, create, and sustain a worry loop, right? So for example, with so much ambiguity, right? Some of the information that's being shared, it seems like it's open to interpretation, or what we seem to be told keeps changing day to day. Ambiguity, not helpful, right? It's novel. None of us have lived through anything quite like this, so we have no experience to fall back on. And it's really unclear what it's going to look like on the other side. So when we have this much ambiguity and novelty and lack of clarity, what our brain is designed to do is we're trained to think ahead, and we're trained to anticipate obstacles or problems. But what happens is our brain starts to fill in the blanks and spin worst case scenarios, right? Stories. So our brain is, again, spinning these worry loops, and that's what's keeping us stuck. So again, I want to ask the question, and I have my chat up now. What are some of the things that are currently worrying you? What's making you sad, stressed, or anxious? Forgetting my phone number. Wow. Yeah. Let's go back to that memory that we were talking about gets impacted. Anybody else? Worried about the health of my family, how I'm going to educate my children. Yeah, our life, right? This brings into clear focus our mortality. Oh, and we're worried about and it's so sad that we can't kiss our children and our grandchildren. We're worried about our health. We're worried. Who thought that getting food could be so stressful? Getting sick, right? These are all things that are worrying us. So yeah, these things that we're feeling, they're all real, and we're all feeling about it. We're worried about loved ones who are living in hotspots, right? I want you to pause and take a moment and reflect on these questions. How many of these things that you're worrying about are outside of your control? How many, I want you to reflect on this. You don't necessarily need to respond in the chat. How many are losses, and that the only action we can actually take in this moment is to grieve? How many are real problems that we can act on in the present moment? And how many of them are just hypothetical problems that might happen in the future, but are equally might not happen in the future? So here's the real challenge here. This is the most significant issue. And if you walk away with anything today, this is the one thing that's the most important. See, our bodies, they can't differentiate between a real physical threat or a perceived emotional one. So what does that mean? That means that whatever we think is stressful becomes stressful in our body. Our body reacts the same way. So a worry or a thought can trigger that cortisol and that adrenaline, that fight or flight response, and it keeps us circulating in there over and over again. This excessive worry that we're experiencing keeps our nervous system in high arousal, in fight or flight. And essentially, we're not giving our body the opportunity to return and toggle back into that rest and restore. And what makes it worse, actually, is the more that this excessive worry happens in our brain, that cortisol that's going through our brain, it makes us more likely to get triggered into stress easier, and it's harder for us to resolve it. So it becomes this perpetual cycle. So I am actually going to stop for a second. I will stop sharing my screen for a second and ask if this is making any sense before we move from the science to what can we all do about it. Anybody have any questions?
Remember to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
You can either raise a hand, you can put it in the chat box. Make sense? All right, at least just, yeah, shake your head so I know you're still tracking with me. We're good? All right, so I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. Let's see, and maybe hopefully those red marks disappeared. Share screen. Okay, we back? We good? All right, so I have a question for you all. type in for me, what are some of the things that you're doing to cope with your worry? What are some things you're doing to cope with your worry? What are some strategies that you're using? Okay. Going on walk, stress baking, breathing, art, exercise, taking precautions in gardening, yoga, mindfulness, running, talking on the phone, right? Getting in connection with others, right? Yoga, getting outside, check in every day. All right, you guys are all experts at this, but let's be honest. How many of us are streaming Netflix? Maybe mindlessly scrolling through social media. Maybe some of us, right? Okay. Maybe us are constantly checking back in with the news, right? We got CNN running all the time as if it's going to change from minute to minute. So when you think about some of the things that we're doing, not watching the news, very smart. I knew this was a smart group. So when I want you to think about some of the things that you do, how helpful are the strategies that you're doing, and also give some thought to how energizing they are, or are they draining, right? Because sometimes some of the things that we do to maybe numb or phase out or suppress or ignore, they might help us in the short term, right? But when we get back to the other reality, boom, like we're back in that loop. We're not really, we're kind of feeding the worry loop. We're not really stopping or going into rest and restore. Yes, Netflix is beneficial, right? Because it's important to kind of zone out and space out. It just depends also what you're watching, right? Okay, so as Dr. Mark Hyman, who's a physician and internationally recognized expert in the field of functional and integrative medicine, says that the promise of science right now has shown that while we can't always change the stressors in our lives, there are so many things we can do now that are actually evidence-backed to help us become more resilient to them. And this is about creating new habits, new ways of coping with stress, and then also practicing them on a consistent basis so that our habitual response isn't to go into fight or flight or fear, but we can stay calm in rest and restore and not get hijacked and not go into a worry loop. Okay, so this is, as I shared with you, this is just a very small piece of my toolkit. The toolkit I call the 3 R's, and it's really based on 3 types of, the practices fall into 3 broad categories, right? These are things that are resets that we can do in the moment to signal our brain that we're safe. We can recover and bounce back faster, or we can rewire our brain to get triggered less. What I'm going to be sharing with you now are these resets or these tools that are practices that can really help us to override these biological programming and manually switch on that rest and restore branch of our system to create these islands of sanity, right? And give our bodies the opportunity to recover. These resets are, what's really great is that our body, or our 5 senses of our body, are really the most direct access point back into the present moment. And what's great is they're simple, always available, and they're tangible, right? Because you can feel something, you can smell something, you can hear something. And what I hope you've been gathering from the first part of this presentation is that some of the challenges that we have aren't just with the uncertainty itself. What can be more problematic at times is when our mind creates these stories or tells us, we try to project too far into the future, or we create these worst case scenarios of what could go wrong. And that is what triggers ourselves into the fight or flight, or the unhelpful stress, if you will. But when we bring ourselves back into our bodies, into the present moment, we can give those stories a break and give ourselves a rest. Okay, so as it turns out, we actually practiced some of these resets before we started the presentation. So I want to ask if anybody is brave and willing to come on with me and tell me what changes that you noticed after you chanted the Nigun. Perhaps your breath changed, the quality of your attention changed, the tension in your body. Does anybody would like to come on and share with me what happened or what they might have noticed?
I will.
Thanks, Eileen. So tell me, what happened? What did you notice?
Well, first of all, I do this regularly, so I'm practiced at it.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime I sit, hope I'm not shouting, with my hands on my knees, my back up straight so my lungs can breathe in more air, breathe in slowly through my nose and out through my mouth, and chanting aloud helps. I can just feel the tension reduce in my body. My shoulders feel more relaxed, my back feels more relaxed, and my mind calms. As I said, I've been doing this for a while, so it happens pretty quickly now. It didn't happen that quickly when I first started, but it still works.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah. So it's amazing that that spinning that we feel in our mind sometimes, we kind of like, what you're describing is that down regulation, right? And believe it or not, it just takes about 6 seconds of deep breathing.
Oh, I believe it.
Us to just switch that switch, pull that switch.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, though, the more we practice it, the easier it becomes, and we can flip the switch. So for some people who haven't been practicing it, it might take longer than 6 seconds, but it really is remarkable. And it's our own body's way of bringing us calm and peace of mind and tranquility.
Yeah. It's astounding.
Yeah. So thanks, Eileen. Thanks so much for coming on. Anybody else want to share perhaps this is the same, everybody feel this about the same? Does anybody have anything different that they'd like to share? Okay, so let's talk about a little bit. I'm going to start sharing my screen again, and I want to start breaking down very, very briefly the science of what's going on when we're doing these things. Hold on. Sharing screen, share screen. Okay. All right. So again, these are all resets that are signaling our brain that we're perfectly safe. So as you might recall, one of the first things we did was we reconnected to the physicality of our body, right? We put our feet on the ground. We felt them on the ground. We felt our sits bones in our chair. And then we started chanting. Chanting is another way of creating breath work. And I'm sure you've seen lots of different breath work. And you just take 3 deep breaths. But anything that we can do to slow our breaths down and deepen our breath is really overriding. It's our body's way of overriding that worry loop in our mind and saying, if I were stressed or if I was really worried, I wouldn't be breathing this slowly and so deeply. And so that's what happens, is that our body flips over to that rest and restore. It creates, even just your breath can create an island of sanity. But for those who know me and know me well, I like to do like multiple things. Like breath is one thing, but if we could do one thing, why don't we do more things and really, kick it up a notch? So not only were we chanting or breathing, we also added another element, right? So I had asked you to put your hand over your hand and maybe touch your neck or your chest or your heart, anywhere. When we feel skin on skin, and if we hold that in place for 20 seconds or more, that sense of touch, it actually releases this feel-good hormone, this oxytocin. So some of you might have felt like this whole down regulation might start also being either initiated or amplified, not just only by our breath, but this release of these feel-good hormones. And for those of us lucky enough to be in this lockdown situation, if you will, with others and with loved ones, we can do this not only ourselves, but we can hold hands with someone, we can massage each other, we can hug each other, but the hug needs to last for 20 seconds. Or if you have a pet, snuggling with a pet has also been shown to help you help release oxytocin, which is likely why you see a lot of service pets around, right? Because when you snuggle and cuddle with a pet, it just feels good. And that's the feel good is the oxytocin. Here's the third thing that was happening when we were chanting or humming. This is a benefit. This is not necessarily a reset, if you will, but when you're chanting and humming and singing, what happens is you're creating vibration where your vagus nerve passes through, the side of your neck and your larynx, right? So that vibration that you're feeling, whether you chant or you hum or you're sing, I tend to do this in the shower a lot. I like to chant and sing and hum in the shower. This is what's doing is you're toning your vagus nerve, okay? So if you think about it, when you do lift weights and you exercise, you get stronger. Well, there are certain things we can do to increase our vagus nerve, which is that on and off toggle switch. So maybe when you brush your teeth, you gargle. Gargling tones your vagus nerve. Maybe when you're listening to soothing music that you put your earbuds in or you put on a headset, because the vibration in your ear also, and you might have heard of sound healing. This is the vibration that also helps you with the vagus nerve. Or when you're streaming Netflix, maybe you can stream some comedy and get some belly laughs going, because when you have a belly laugh, it also releases your diaphragm and again jiggles that vagus nerve and turns it on. So all of these things also can support you so that you can go back and forth more easily. Now, you'll notice what all of them have in common was that we're engaging all of the senses of our body. We're bringing ourselves back to the present moment awareness where we are safe. And we're telling our brains that right here, right now, everything is perfectly safe. We're creating another island of sanity. Here's another one of my favorites, and that is gratitude. And that's another reset. This is something that not only helps you in the present moment, but it also helps you, it can help you, well, a couple things. One is when you engage your gratitude for all 5 of your senses, it helps you in the present moment because you're paying attention to positive things. Again, you're sending this message to your body that life is good and it can relax. But over time, gratitude becomes a practice, and then you don't even have to think about it. And I would venture to guess that a lot of us are feeling very grateful for things that we used to take so much for granted, right? So for example, here are some things that we can do with our normal everyday things. So for example, when I have my cup, I'm not a coffee drinker, but I'm a tea drinker. And this works equally well with coffee, right? So when you take your morning cup of coffee or your morning cup of tea, right? Take a moment to really feel the cup in your hands, and you feel the warmth of it. And you just close your eyes and breathe in the beautiful aroma. And then as you bring it to your lips, taste the beautiful taste of it and feel as you drink it, it goes down and through your throat. I'm sure you appreciate now that coffee or that tea in a way that you hadn't, that you used to gulp it down and drink it in the past, right? Or here's something that I do a lot. When I stand outside, when I go outside and when the sun is shining, I feel like I'm one of those plants that are like trying to get the sun, like the vitamin D. So the first thing I do when I go outside is I put my face up to the sun, and I just take in all the beautiful sunshine. I feel the warmth and the heat. And then I open my eyes and I look around and I see all the beautiful blooming trees. And I smell the aromas. There's some really beautiful scents that are happening there's honeysuckle is out now, and it's beautiful. or listen for the birds, right? There's not so much car traffic, so we can hear the birds now. So again, these are things we do all the time, but we can create moments of gratitude. And here's something else that we used to take, I know I used to take for granted a lot, is food, right? When we used to have food on the table, but now we can really appreciate what it takes to put food on our table, right? It's a little scary now to go out to the supermarket, right? And not only that, but we have a real appreciation for the people who are risking their lives to keep that food chain going. So we're showing its appreciation for the truck drivers or the people who are stocking the shelves or at the checkout counter, right? So now before I take any bite of my food, I just sit there and take a moment and say a moment of gratitude. And I look around and I see the beautiful colors on my table, or maybe I'll smell smell it. And the taste, I don't know about you, but maybe it's frozen vegetables and maybe it's not exactly what we had imagined or planned. But I tell you, I'm much more grateful for food right now. I feel it. And the idea here is to get embodied gratitude, to really feel it in our system, not just because to get that embodiness is how we downregulate. If we just do it in passing through our mind, it's not the same. And again, this experience of appreciation, when we embody it in that way, our body recognizes that there's nothing that it needs to defend against in this present moment. So it feels safe and relaxed. And what happens over time when you do this is that appreciation begins to shift the focus of our attention to what is wrong and what do I need to fix. Again, we're always scanning the environment. What's wrong? What's dangerous? This is something evolutionarily hardwired. But it also evens the playing field and allows us to start to notice what's going well. What am I grateful for? I'm in a beautiful, safe home. I am currently healthy. I'm surrounded. I know that my loved ones are safe. I mean, when you think about what else is going on in the world, we're actually sequestering at home is awful, but we're also very fortunate in our community that we have plenty of food. We have plenty of, we're in a safe and a beautiful environment. And here's the other thing that gratitude does. It helps, back a little bit to the science, it really helps us to balance out what I was talking about, this negativity bias, right? So again, we come hardwired with a negativity bias, right? Because that's how our species adapted, right? Because the people who saw the negative and the bad and felt it strongly were the ones that were survived and passed on their genes to us. So Rick Hansen uses this wonderful metaphor, which I think is really helpful, is the negative and the bad is like Velcro. We feel it more viscerally and it sticks to us. And positive emotions are like Velcro. They just kind of bounce right off, which is why gratitude is so helpful when we embody it. So one of the most significant insights that I got from my training in the science of well-being came from my teacher and mentor, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who is a former professor from Harvard and is a leading thinker in this, an expert in the field of positive psychology. And what he shared, and which I think is really, really helpful, is to think about the fact that stress in and of itself is really not the problem, right? Because stress and fear are important. It's perfectly normal. It's not a character flaw. And when it's helpful, it helps us take actions for our safety and our survival. It's when we get stuck, and it gets stuck in the worry loop, when it's the lack of recovery that creates the problem, right? And it becomes counterproductive. So, which is why we can take out this toolkit at any time and create these islands of sanity, and to practice creating these islands of sanity and override the fight or flight and downregulate our nervous system. So here's the thing. I've been working on these tools for decades. And I think it was Eileen shared, she's been doing some of these things for a while. And we still get stressed, but somehow we're able to come back to homeostasis a little faster. But the invitation to you is to really start where you are and understand and notice that even the smallest and minor shifts in how you do things really can bring about significant changes in your stress level, right? And what I shared with you about, taking a few deep breaths and noticing the sights and the sounds as you going on a walk anyway, or having gratitude for when you're eating. These things are things that we can do that doesn't add extra time to our day. And we can rely on habit formation. There's a little science, the neuroscience of habit formation, is that we when we trigger, when I do this, I will. So you might have noticed when I shared with you, like when I go for a walk, I will pause and invite in gratitude to all my senses. When I eat, I will. So you don't have to remember rely on memory. You just take one thing and you say, when I do this, I will do that, and practice it over and over again until it becomes a habit. And then these are things you can do over and over again. For example, like I said, when I go into a shower, I start singing. So these are all things that you can do to create islands of sanity. And my hope is that now that you understand the science of stress, having that background will allow you to be more mindful and intentional and purposeful in the activities that you choose to do during the day. Excuse me 1 second, I take a sip of water. So, and you can be purposeful in what you choose in terms of stress relief or how you want to cope. When you start to notice, maybe your breath is starting to get shallow, or your brain is spinning out of control, or your heart starts racing, and you notice you're like stuck in that worry loop, right? You can take actions to override your biological programming, bring yourself back to the present moment, and give your body a chance to rest and restore. And when you understand this science, what happens is my clients find that just understanding how our brain is designed, how our bodies are designed to work, they find infinite possibilities. I just gave a few examples, but there are really infinite possibilities that are available to create islands of sanity throughout your day. I want to just, before I open up to questions, because I'll stay on as long as people want me to stay on, but I just want to offer a few more tools for people. In the invitation that you got, you'll notice that there are exercises that you can download as well, direct links, how to manage unhelpful worry, how to practice postponing worry, and ways to respond to worry with compassion. So that might offer some extra support. I will also add this one-pager, this Creating Islands of Sanity Throughout Your Day. This includes all of the resets, which have recover and rewire in there, but they're just little things you can do during the day. And you can feel free to download. And was so gratified to see that email that Jill shared with us, that there are so many congregants who have offered to offer their expertise on a pro bono basis to this community. And I just want to offer that to anybody who needs a little extra support or a little extra help. Here's my email address. It'll also be available on the site. Please contact me if you could use a little extra one-on-one support. I am here for all of us. I'm here for you, however I can support you. So let me stop sharing now, and I'd like to open up the floor and like I said, we have about, 10 minutes or so, 7 minutes, but I will not leave until I answer any questions that people have. So feel free to ask any questions.
Just remember to unmute yourself if you've got a question. Or Alison, if you'd like, I could unmute everyone, in which case I'd just ask you to be sensitive to noise in your background.
Should I introduce myself? I don't see my name up here.
I see, it's Arlene. That's my mom's name.
Oh, yeah, okay. I thought you were great. I really enjoyed it very much. I have to say that I've done TM. Many years ago, I started TM. I really think I should go back to it because it really works. What you're saying, and of course I had a mantra, but what you're saying really, really helps the mind settle down. and helps then to make good decisions because you have the lack of anxiety. But I also have found that exercise is extremely beneficial to me. I make a point of exercising daily. Um, I usually go to the gym, I walk. And I also think eating healthy foods and good rest. So if you can do some of those or all of those, it really it helps you. It helps. I'm not saying it's the total cure, but it really if you do it, you'll see. Incorporate some of those details into your life and, uh, and see how it works for you.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing, Arlene. I will just throw another little bit of science in there. I didn't have time. I didn't want to inundate you with too much science, but now that you mentioned exercise, that's an excellent reset, right? There's a lot of science that says when you exercise, it's like taking an antidepressant. So if you exercise every day, you get a little shot of dopamine and serotonin. And bonus if you exercise outside because the sun gives extra serotonin. So also if you exercise and perhaps walk vigorously, it also helps you to break up some of those stress hormones that are maybe haven't metabolized yet, that are sitting in your extremities. So I do some qigong and I like shake it out. I do walking or anything to get those hormones, the stress feeling out of my extremities really, really helps. So thanks for sharing that, Arlene. Anybody else? Questions, thoughts? Okay, well, I have one last question for you, of course. I'm going to go back to my screen share. By the way, anything comes up, as I said, I am here. Just reach out. If any questions come up about this, just reach out to me. I'm happy to, however I can support you guys. And by the way, it helps me, right? So helping others, we also know volunteering and helping others is another way to manage anxiety. So this is my gift. You think it's a gift to you, but it really was a gift to me because it helps me with managing my anxiety. Okay, so here's the last question I'm going to leave us all with. So here's the thing. Right, so like I said, a lot of the stuff that I shared isn't necessarily rocket science. What I shared was the how and the why that they work. But they only work when you do them. It only works when you try to do it. And when it also is helpful when you do it with intention. If you say, I'm going for a walk today because I'm going to create this island. If you go for a walk and you're spinning out and thinking about everything you have to do, that's really defeating the purpose. So if you go outside with intention and you take in the sun and you walk vigorously or you breathe deeply, that really helps you to get back into that rest and restore. So the last thing I'm going to ask in the chat is I want you to tell me what's one thing that you're going to do differently tomorrow or even tonight when you hang up. What's one thing you're going to do differently to help bridge that gap between knowing something that you could be doing and actually doing it? That's my husband, by the way. Listen to my wife. Address anxiety with a calming response. Taking virtual yoga classes. Actually, one of our members who's here gives beautiful yoga classes at Movement RX, Deborah Livingston. I've taken a lot of her classes. She does an excellent job. Appreciate that warm cup of coffee and smell it and drink it more mindfully. Yeah. That's Deb. If anybody's interested, she does great yoga classes. Find joy in the small things, right? Find pleasure and joy. And in an embodied way, not in an offhanded. Chanting in the shower. Going to be more aware on the walk I'm taking right now. Fabulous. Eating healthy, right? Things that we all know we could be doing or should be doing, but when we do it with intention, it really, really has more impact and more effect. Okay. Well, we did it, Miles. It's exactly the top of the hour. And we've, so thank you all so much for joining. I really, really appreciate it. And if you found this helpful, or you think you can always, since we have recorded it, you can always go back, or if you want to share it with someone, I'm sure Jill sometime early next week will put it on the virtual Beth David link, and you can share it with other people who might find it helpful. Okay, so I'm actually going to go out for a walk with my family too. So thank you all, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.